tends to be a different story. But in the development process of these kids, how much of a mindset do these coaches have of exactly what Wally's talking about?
So if I understand your question, Peter, it's what's the level of maturation and or skills within a 30-year-old, 35-year-old parent to work within a youth organization or work with a coach within a youth organization and understand the philosophy and the ideas that Wally just shared. Is that what you're asking?
Exactly. And what responsibility does that youth organization have in mentoring those coaches in those concepts?
Well, the question you're asking is huge, quite frankly. I mean, I would say that most of the youth organizations that I've participated with and tried to partner with, most of the coaches that are coaching are parent coaches.
Yeah.
And therefore they have a dual role, one of which is to have a kid on the team oftentimes, and then to try to coach their kid's team, which I think is actually virtually impossible to do without hurting somebody. And I think the youth organization has an incredible responsibility to share the philosophy of the entire organization and then pass it down into the coaches. Unfortunately, I don't know that there is a lot of accountability for when that is happening, and then accountability for training and or development when it isn't happening. So I think the idea of trying to get some shared meaning around important ideas with the parents so that when you coach their kids and you do things that are in alignment with those three concepts, you may not share the same meaning of what that stuff means, but at least you're communicating clearly about what your intent is and how they can frame the decisions that you make with regards to their kids.
Yeah, that was my hope, that we'd be able to do that, because, the best thing about youth sports is volunteerism. The worst thing about youth sports is volunteerism.
That's exactly right.
You get what you pay for.
You'll probably find, Peter, that 20% of your parents will track with you. 20% of them won't have a clue what you're trying to do, and the rest of them will be silent about it. That's been my experience over the years.
And one or two of them will be a pain in the ass.
Yeah, and the one or two will be the voices that they'll be calling you all the time, trying to have you explain why you're doing what you're doing.
Yep.
Sean, I'd like to mention that up here at the U13 level, we try to get non-parent coaches, but we have two sets of parent coaches. They're technically and I think ethically very good. We are looking for a third coach, but it looks like we're getting another parent coach that hopefully fits the ethical standards. When I'm talking about that, is managing the bench for development and competing. Above that level, we don't have parent coaches. Do we have grief? Yes, we do. And I like what you said about the importance of the organization having a philosophy, reinforcing and developing a culture that matches what we're talking about. And I think I've always used the term inmates running the asylum. Well, they're that 10% that usually leave an organization when it's not good enough for them to find greener pastures. They're going from one team to another. They're going from one system to a private system, thinking it'll be better, when in fact, wherever they go, the same problem occurs. The bench is shortened. The roles of players are identified too soon. and players don't feel a part of the team. Reinforcing what I'm saying about their social courage to feel valued and speak up. Nobody dares to speak up. We call it Speak Out here, and Hockey Canada has a program to speak out on bullying, to speak out on harassment. And I think that a course in it hasn't really helped so much, but a lot more work needs to be done. So go ahead, anybody else here? And hell, I sure appreciating hearing from you, having gleaned everything over the years with us and what we're talking about to this point.
Well, as I think all of us are trying to change the hockey world, and I certainly spent a lot of time and energy trying to do it through USA Hockey and coach education programs and so on and so forth, and even in my local programs. And I've finally come to the conclusion, not suddenly, but that the only thing I really have control over is the environment that I'm in, the team I'm coaching, and hopefully, a little bit of it will rub off on other teams in our organization, which I think might be happening a little bit. And so I think we can only do so much. When I mentioned role players in the early part of the conversation, I didn't mean it with any disrespect, because I don't shorten benches. And I've always tried to really recognize the kids that are doing the things on the ice in the game that I think are so important, other than scoring goals and other than those things that most everybody focuses on, because it takes 5 guys to score a goal, not one. And helping kids understand that they can actually play a lot harder away from the puck, and the Oilers are going to show this, I think, that by incorporating more players into the lineup and valuing them, they're probably going to win the Stanley Cup, and or they're going to give it a good run. So to me, coaching is the culture you create in the locker room and around your team is so important to, number one, avoiding a lot of the problems that exist. Especially when you get up to that what are Bantams, U15, 15 and under. Those kids are, they quit listening to their parents quite so much, and you can create a culture that they want to be part of, that they value, and they will protect their culture. And now what happens the next year? They probably go back to a different culture. Go to high school, everybody thinks at high school, the only thing that matters here is winning games. And I'm not so sure they're right. So I think at high school, Sean was helping me with high school, and we had a B team and an A league, and we did pretty darn well over the years, really well. But it was always about the culture we created, and making everybody part of the process, and part of the success, part of the failures on the ice. And the coaches, I never separated myself and my staff from the team. We win, we lose, we tie, we learn together. And I probably figured in high school I was spending 800 to 1,000 hours a year on my team, and that's a lot of hours. So, Sean, do you want to pitch in at all, or?
Peter's got his hand up here. Peter?
Yeah, along with that, when we were talking there about the coaches and that earlier, one of the things that I did that worked out really well with this organization I work with is I instituted a monthly coaches meeting where I had, I still have ties with the university where I coach. So I'd bring them to campus in the conference room. They like being on a college campus and that, and we would meet every month, and it was pretty good. Small organization, so with head coaches and assistants, there's probably around 25 coaches total, and we got anywhere from 17 to 20 pretty much on a regular basis attending. And what I found was, because they're all over the place, like there are police officers, there are people in the tech industry, the service industry, right? Plumbers, electricians, educators, all that. But once we got them in that room and they all began talking, because the whole idea was I'd have some sort of a topic that we would talk about, but I'd always make sure that sort of bled into them just kind of talking about how their season's going, practices, issues that they have, and getting them on board with understanding, and hopefully them understanding, like really sort of the Hal's point about a team, a group, them realizing they are a team, because we always talked about that. And that hopefully then now trickles through, and in some it did, and some they were just there, and it wasn't like there was a room full of experts. There were a few experts in there, in their minds anyway, for sure. And it was great to have the conversation. So I think that, again, I always harp on that. I think that's kind of my big thing is, if you're not prepared to be a leader and understand what that is, how are you going to pass that on to the kids? And I even see that too at the NCAA level, because there are a lot of younger guys who are excited and they get that opportunity. And I've spent a fair amount of time talking to their assistants, asking them, so what kind of things does coach do to help you, even in the off season, because there are seminars and things like that you can go to. What kind of things do you guys do to get educated so you're on the same page to understand leadership? And it's surprising how little of that goes on. And I'm not talking like at Division I level, because I think there's a different type of commitment there. I mean, Division II, Division III. I'm surprised at how little education the head coaches are passing on to their assistants. And maybe that's because, again, we've got that, not to pick on an age group, but we've got that 30s to 40s who maybe themselves haven't had a lot of that kind of training.
So just before Sean chips in, that book I shared with you guys, Jeff Jansen's Team Captains, the Leadership Manual, and I started using that 15 years ago, maybe, exactly for the reason what Peter's talking about, is if I appoint or the kids elect captains, I mean, who in the world would put somebody in a position of leadership with no training, no mentoring, no conversation? Well, I see it in business. In my day job, I see this every day, and it's very ineffective when people get put in leadership positions with no clue on really what their job is. And so at the high school level, we had a monthly meeting with not only the captains, but the captains were allowed to, or were asked to invite other players into that group that they thought would be good leaders and good supporters of what we're trying to accomplish. And I'm